London, just after sunset, inside the Wellington Club, where crystal chandeliers glowed over marble floors and power decided who was seen and who was ignored. At the center table, Thomas Ashford leaned back in his chair, wine glass raised, laughter sharp and careless. Across from him stood Sophie Bennett, still in her grey cleaning uniform, fingers damp from disinfectant, spine straight despite the heat crawling up her neck. "Come closer," Thomas said, smiling as if she were entertainment. "Quick question. Can you even follow numbers like these?" He slid a scribbled calculation across the table. The room tilted toward him, waiting for her to fail. Sophie read it once. Then again. Her pulse steadied. "You're wrong," she said. The smile cracked. Chairs stopped shifting. Someone inhaled too loudly. "Excuse me," Thomas snapped. "Don't embarrass yourself." She didn't raise her voice. "Your depreciation compounds. Your land value doesn't. You're 8 million short, and that's before taxes." Silence landed hard. What no one saw was Sophie's memory igniting. The same building name, the same man, the same cruelty that had destroyed her father years before. This wasn't coincidence. It was a reckoning stepping into the light. The cleaner wasn't guessing. She was ending something. Like this video. Subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. Because what follows doesn't just expose a lie. It brings down a billionaire. The moment Sophie's voice cut through the laughter, the room hardened around her. Thomas didn't blink at first. He simply stared, waiting for her to shrink, waiting for the familiar pattern. Embarrassment, apology, retreat. But Sophie didn't retreat. She kept her eyes on the napkin as if it were a boardroom blueprint and not a weapon he meant to use against her. Thomas leaned forward. "Say that again," he ordered, each syllable cold. "You're 8 million short," she repeated. "And that's before renovation losses." A low murmur rippled through the tables, the kind of sound that meant curiosity had replaced amusement. Thomas forced a laugh, but it was stiff, strained. "You think you understand real numbers," he said. "You're here because you mop floors. Don't pretend you're something else." Sophie held the napkin out to him. "The numbers don't care what my job is." For a second, his expression flickered, something she couldn't read fully, something between recognition and disbelief. But he grabbed the napkin, crushed it in his fist, and turned back to his guests with a thin smile. "She's confused," he declared. "Ignore it." But the room didn't ignore it. Investors exchanged glances. Business partners cut their conversations short. Even the waiters, trained to be invisible, paused mid-stride. And Sophie walked away, not because she was dismissed, but because she finally understood something. Thomas Ashford was slipping. He was reckless. And if he could make a mistake this obvious in public, what was he doing behind closed doors? That night, when she pushed open the door to her small East London flat, the anger she had been holding back all evening broke through. Her mother was asleep, the oxygen machine humming in the corner. Sophie moved quietly, but the emotions inside her didn't care about silence. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, opened her laptop, and whispered to herself. "He still thinks I'm nothing." The screen lit up, slow and flickering. It was old, almost ancient compared to the devices owned by the people she served drinks and wiped tables for. But it still held her university logins, remnants of a life she was forced to abandon. She typed Thomas's name, then the name of his company. Financial records appeared, public filings, development proposals. Enough data to form a map of arrogance. Every line she read deepened her breathing. Thomas wasn't just careless. He was building an empire on borrowed promises. Loans stacked on loans, projections inflated to impossible heights, timelines that ignored physical reality. Soft footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Her mother appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "Sophie," she whispered, "you're up late." Sophie closed the laptop halfway. "Just a little work, Mom." Her mother studied her face the way only mothers can. "You saw him again today, didn't you?" Sophie didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her mother walked closer, lowering herself beside her. "Your father," He fought that man with everything he had. It wasn't enough. But that wasn't his fault. Sophie swallowed hard. I know. No, her mother said softly. You don't. Not really. You still think you have to fix what happened. Sophie looked down at her shaking hands. Maybe I do. Her mother reached out and covered them with her own. Frail, warm, trembling. Just don't lose yourself trying to take down a monster. But Sophie had already made her decision. She waited until her mother went back to bed. Then she opened the laptop fully and whispered, I'm not losing myself. I'm finding him. The next evening at the club, she moved through the hallways with new purpose. She didn't rush, didn't linger. She simply allowed herself to listen. Wealthy men rarely spoke softly when they believed no one important was within earshot. And no one was less important in their eyes than a cleaner. That was their mistake. One night, as she wiped down a side table, she heard Thomas hiss sharply. I don't care how close the vote is. I'm not losing Riverside Plaza. A nervous voice answered. I'll push the council. I need more time. Time isn't what I'm paying for, Winters. Sophie froze. She didn't have to turn to know the voice belonged to Jeffrey Winters, a council member she had seen in local news reports. She didn't dare breathe too loudly. Their voices dipped, but she heard enough. Payments, timelines, guarantees. Illegal promises wrapped in casual arrogance. She didn't move until they walked away. Then she reached into her apron pocket and touched her phone. She hadn't wanted to do this. But justice wasn't gentle. Justice demanded proof. That night she recorded everything she could. Not pictures, too risky. Not video, too obvious. Just voices. Voices telling the truth they thought the world would never hear. But the recording alone wasn't enough. Not for a man like Thomas. She needed something bigger. Something irrefutable. And then the perfect opportunity revealed itself. Thomas announced a grand presentation. Press, investors, celebrities, politicians. The unveiling of Riverside Plaza. A spectacle built on lies. That was the moment Sophie decided she would not expose him quietly. She would expose him exactly how he tried to expose her. Publicly, brutally, with nowhere for him to hide. In the days leading up to the presentation, Sophie lived two lives. By day, she scrubbed the marble floors of the Wellington Club, pushing her cart across polished surfaces while men in suits discussed millions as casually as weather. By night, she spread documents across her bed. Environmental reports, business registries, maps of the development site. She analyzed numbers until dawn, her mind slicing through projections like a surgeon revealing the truth beneath. One evening, overwhelmed, she closed her laptop and whispered into the darkness. Dad, I hope you'd be proud. Her father's old Cambridge mug sat on the shelf above her. She touched it gently, promising herself that she would finish what he couldn't. When exhaustion pulled her under, she dreamed of him standing outside Hartley Tower, pleading with inspectors who refused to meet his eyes. She dreamed of him at the kitchen table, head in his hands. She dreamed of the silent ambulance removing the weight of her world. She woke with tears on her pillow and a new sense of purpose. This ends now. On the day of the presentation, the Wellington Club glowed brighter than ever. Chandeliers sparkled as if celebrating the man they assumed would be victorious. Sophie arrived early, cart rattling slightly over the stone floor. Her uniform felt too thin for the weight she carried. She moved to the back of the room. Investors whispered about projected returns. Journalists adjusted camera lenses. Council members reviewed talking points. And Thomas stood near the stage, polished, perfect, unaware. The presentation began with applause that he drank like expensive wine. Tonight, he announced, we usher in a new era for London. But Sophie heard something else in his voice, a tremor beneath the confidence. He hadn't forgotten last night's humiliation. And she had no intention of letting that be the end of it. As he clicked to the financial slide, Sophie stepped forward. Your projections are wrong. The room twisted toward her. Cameras pivoted. Thomas stiffened. You again, he muttered. She walked down the aisle. Her voice didn't shake. You built this project on false numbers, false reports, and illegal deals. Whispering. A dozen phones lifted to record. Security! Thomas shouted. But the journalists blocked the path. Let her speak, someone said. Sophie laid the documents across the front row seats. Employment registries, property valuations, environmental maps. Each sheet stripped away a layer of Thomas's empire. Investors leaned in, comparing them to Thomas's projections. Doubt spread like fire through dry grass. And then she played the recording. Thomas's voice filled the room. Make it happen. The payment's already in your account. Winters stood abruptly, face pale, tie askew. This is taken out of context, he cried. But no one listened. Sophie stepped closer to the stage. You destroyed my father with lies. And now your lies are destroying you. Thomas opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It was the first time the room had ever seen him powerless. Before the club fully erupted, before journalists swarmed the stage, before investors demanded answers, Sophie felt something settle inside her. Not triumph. Not revenge. Something quieter. Something like justice taking its first full breath. But justice wasn't finished. What happened next would cost Thomas far more than embarrassment. And that is where everything changes. Because the man who believed no one could touch him was about to learn exactly how far a nobody could go. When the investigators released their findings, the city moved quickly. Board members resigned overnight, partners vanished, and Thomas faced the courtroom without the armor he once wore so easily. Sophie watched from the back row, not with triumph, but with the quiet steadiness of someone who had finally placed a broken truth back into the world. The verdict came swiftly. Each count stripped away another layer of the myth he had crafted, until nothing remained but the man who had believed no one could challenge him. Outside the courthouse, cold air swept across the steps. Reporters called her name, but she kept walking, letting the noise fall behind. She wasn't interested in headlines. The real victory was knowing her father's story no longer lived in shadows. It had shape now, and witnesses, and a future she could step into without fear. Weeks later, as she helped a small family navigate a dispute with another landlord, she realized the shift within herself. She no longer carried the weight of being overlooked. She carried purpose. And that purpose had room to grow. That night she passed by the river. Lights rippled across the water, bright and steady. For the first time in years, the city felt open, alive with possibilities her younger self never imagined she'd reclaim. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and help Canada's Heartfelt Tales continue bringing powerful journeys to life by subscribing.